Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm finally going to do a tutorial which I have been meaning to do for a pretty long time now, and it has been highly requested as well for me to do a skin retouching tutorial. However, this tutorial is going to be basically about the art of dodging and burning. So I feel like there's not a set way that you have to do dodging and burning, but it is a very helpful technique that I've used for quite a while now, and it has been around for quite a long time. A lot of professional photographers and retouchers will use this in their retouching work, especially on studio portraits or any beauty shots that they might have. And it is a long and tedious process, so this isn't going to be a comprehensive tutorial on skin retouching. This is just going to be the steps on dodging and burning and what I usually like to do in my work. But I will be uploading, hopefully soon, a more in-depth beauty retouching tutorial where I go start to finish. So that's probably going to be a few hours long, or I'll try and condense it as much as possible, but this one's going to be probably a little bit shorter, otherwise it would be about 3 to 4 hours long, as that's how long usually dodging and burning can take on images. For those who don't know, dodging and burning is basically lightening and darkening parts of the image. So you have your dodge and burn tools actually just over here, but they're not the tools I'll be using today. So the dodge tool usually makes things brighter and the burn tool will make things darker. The tools that I'm actually going to be using today though will be non-destructive. So if I were to use these tools straight onto the photograph, that would be more of a destructive way of doing things. And we don't really want to do that, especially with skin retouching. We want it to be quite high quality. The way I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to start off with the first step here, is we're just going to duplicate the background. So this is step number 1. And this layer now is going to be our base layer. It is going to be for editing everything else that we can't use dodging and burning for. So whether it be taking out hairs from the photograph, as you can see just here, there's quite a few stray hairs, so we might use that for that. Any stubborn blemishes that won't disappear or be a little bit more even with dodging and burning, we'll use this layer for that. We're going to come back to this layer later on though. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go down to adjustment layers, and we're going to create 2 curves layers. So I'm going to click on curves. Now this first layer is going to be for dodging and creating highlights. So I'm going to move the bar up into the highlight section and make it nice and bright. Now I'm going to hold down Control and press I on the keyboard, and that's just inverted the layer. So now we've got this black box down here, and we will come back to that in a second. And I'm going to create another layer now that's exactly the same. So adjustment layers and then curves. And we're going to bring the bar down this time. Now this is going to be our burning layer, which will be for shadows. And once again, we'll hold down Control and then press I on the keyboard, and that's inverted. So I'm actually going to rename these layers. This one I'm actually going to move just underneath the dodging one. I like to have the dodging one at the top because it tends to be the one that I use the most. Now I'm going to right click the layer and rename it as dodging. And then I'm going to click on this layer and rename this as burning. So once we've got our 2 dodging and burning layers there, we'll click back on dodging. And we have to make sure this black box is selected. So this is basically the mask for it. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint onto this mask, and we're going to bring through the highlights that we created with the curves. So making sure that black box is selected, we're going to now go over to the Paintbrush tool just on this side. Make sure that is selected. I'm actually going to zoom in just a little bit so we can have a closer look at the image. Alright, and this brush is going to be probably roughly about 12-13 pixels is usually what I like to use on photographs. And we're also going to make sure that the flow is right down to 1%. And this is going to give it a really nice soft effect. I've got to mention as well with the brush, just make sure the hardness is down at 0% as well. And we also have to ensure that this is selected as white, so it will show up on the black mask. So we're going to essentially use this tool to lighten up the darker areas of the image. So any little shadows, I'm going to zoom in even more. So any little shadows here, any little unevenness in the skin tone, we're actually going to lighten that up. This is why it's probably so tedious and it takes so long, because you really do have to zoom quite far in and make sure that a lot of the areas are lightened. Now, just before I do start dodging and burning, I just want to mention that I think the first step really should be is to determine what kind of lighting you're going to use and how it's going to benefit you the most in terms of retouching, because the more even light that you have, the easier it is going to be to retouch without overdoing it. But also I think it's important to keep a lot of the texture in the image and find out which lighting is going to give you the best texture in the image, because a lot of this texture here is really what we want to keep. And I think originally when I first started doing this and first started retouching, I thought that you would have to bring it into Photoshop and then add the texture in afterwards and really develop that all in Photoshop into the skin retouching. And now I've kind of realized that it's not really the case. And I think most of it is done before you even get into Photoshop, and you really have to make sure that texture is there. And it's really, I think the retouching now is all about retaining that texture. We really don't want to lose any of this. So we really just want to smoothen out some parts and even out the skin tone a little bit more, but we don't want to really touch the skin texture at all. And I've really learnt over the years to not play around with the skin as much, and to really not touch the texture as much as I used to, because I used to just use the healing tools and kind of just place them everywhere and anywhere, and it doesn't really give you the best quality in your work. So I think this is why dodging and burning really helps to keep a lot of the quality within the photograph. But I think it's just something to think about before you even get into Photoshop, and just make sure that your images are sharp and that the texture is visible and the lighting is how you want it. So anyway, back to dodging and burning. Now we're going to start dodging. So clicking on this black box and choosing our paintbrush again and zooming in, we're going to start to paint over some of the darker areas. So I'm just going to start moving the brush over some spots. And you don't need to do this really heavy-handedly either. It's just kind of going in circles. I don't really have a specific technique or a spot that I like to start in the image. Usually, I just usually start with one cheek and kind of work my way around the face. But yeah, just kind of filling in those darker areas. So I mean, Elise has amazing skin, so there's really not going to be a huge amount of retouching we need to do on her skin. I don't really see the point in, especially with models, if you've got a model with really good skin, there's really not much point in sitting there for hours and hours and retouching every little pore, because it's probably just not necessary. And I think if you want to keep a bit of that texture as well, how you edit your photos is totally up to you, and there is no right and wrong way. This is just how I like to edit mine. But I generally think that you can determine how much retouching needs to be done before you even really brought it into Photoshop, brought the photograph in, because I think when you think about the style of your shoot, especially being a fashion shoot, you can think about how much retouching you want to really put in to the photograph. And especially if it's going to be more of a raw photograph, I really wouldn't, in terms of this photograph, probably retouch too much at all, because as I said, Elise has good skin and I could really just get away with doing some slight dodging and burning. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to do it more so as if we were focusing on the hair and makeup, and just kind of emphasize that nice glowiness. So I usually find these kind of areas towards the edge of the face can sometimes be the hardest, because that's where there's a lot of hair, stray hairs, and it tends to get a bit darker around the edges too. So sometimes that can make it a little bit more difficult. But we'll just keep running the brush over these darker spots. So I think it really helps to have breaks when you're doing this type of editing, because I find myself that I get really strained eyes. It does require a lot of staring at your screen basically, and really focusing on parts of the photograph, and I think after a little while that can get quite straining. So it's probably not too good for your eyes in one point. But the other point I was going to make was, sometimes if you don't have a break, you can overdo it a little bit and you can retouch too much. And I think it helps to, personally I go maybe every 15 to 20 minutes and have a break. And it's good to come back with fresh eyes and actually see if you're overdoing it, or if you need to do more, or if what you've already done is looking okay. Sometimes if you just sit here for hours and hours on end without a break and then come back, you can realize that it's well overdone, or maybe you haven't done enough even though you thought it was finished. So it's really good to have a break. Definitely health-wise though, it's good. Personally, when I'm doing dodging and burning and editing beauty photos, I tend to get sick of looking at one spot, and then I'll just quickly move on to another spot just randomly, which sometimes is worse because I leave the harder parts till last to edit. But yeah, sometimes it helps to just not focus in the same spot for too long. So I'm just going to quickly zoom out and give you guys a quick preview of what that has done. So if we click this layer on and off, you can see that it's really evened out the skin tone and just gotten rid of some of the textured parts that we don't want. So if we continue to do that around the face, you can see what effect that's going to have. So I'm going to continue to start on the other cheek and keep retouching. So once again, as kind of like an update, I'll just do a before and after. So that's just what the dodging has done to the image already, and that's without burning or any other adjustments really. So it is quite a powerful tool to use, and I think it's good to use it for as much as possible. The more you don't have to actually touch the texture of the skin, the better. There are exceptions, however, there's a lot of things that unfortunately you'll need to use other tools for, but in terms of dodging and burning, I do try to use it for most things. I'm going to just start dodging on the forehead now, and I'm going to show you guys what I do to remove that huge dust speck there and some of the stray hairs as well, and I'll show you guys what technique I like to use on that. But first I will continue dodging. So I'm just moving the dodge tool across all these lines. So just before I go any further, I'm going to start to remove some of these stray hairs here. Now this is where I'd go back to my original background copy layer, so this one here that we duplicated in the beginning. And now I'm going to go over to the spot healing brush tool. I'm going to make the brush a little bit smaller. And then I'm just going to run that across the hairs as precisely as possible and start to remove them. Now this tool can be a bit temperamental sometimes, and it likes to come up with some interesting samples of the skin and can sometimes end up lowering the quality of the image. So I really do have to be careful here in just selecting the parts that I want to remove. So as you can see, this is starting to get a little bit, in terms of quality, not great. So this is because we've got a lot of things here that we need to remove, and sampling can sometimes kind of smudge things together and it doesn't end up looking great, but we will just fix that in a second. I'm just going to take out some of these other hairs. And this huge dust speck. Okay, so once that's done and we've removed most of the hairs that we need to, we'll start sort of repairing this area. So we're going to go back to dodging now and grab our paintbrush, and we're just going to go over some of those darker areas there. I'm going to lighten them up a little bit and hopefully even out the skin tone a little bit more. Okay, so I'm just going to do a before and after of that, and you can see it's just kind of evened out the top of the hairline there. I'm going to zoom out so you guys can see a bit better. So it's just kind of evening it out. And now I'm going to go back to the background copy again, and I'm just going to go around the rest of the face now and use the spot healing brush tool to just remove any little dots and spots that we can't remove with dodge and burn. I'm just going to be really light-handed with this tool because I really don't want to touch the skin texture too much. Okay, so another progress shot. We'll do a before and after now. So that is the before, and now that's the after. So now I'm going to focus on the eyes just quickly and show you guys what I would usually do when it comes to this particular area. So I'm going to stay with the dodging tool for now and the paintbrush. And I'm just going to go over some of the areas, the shadows just underneath the brow bone that are a little bit dark, and kind of lighten that up a bit more. So I think it's really important, especially when you're working with a makeup artist, to make sure that the retouching, especially around the eye area and anywhere else that there's makeup, isn't too overdone. I think the general consensus from most makeup artists that I've spoken to is that they don't want their makeup really retouched to the point that they can't even tell it's theirs anymore. And sometimes it can be easy to do when you get carried away with the rest of the retouching, but I think it's always important to go fairly light around the eyes and just make sure that you're just tidying. Essentially, you don't want to sort of get rid of anything in particular. So I'll usually run it just underneath the eye as well. And I usually like to get a really small brush, like even smaller. And then I'll start to go and dodge in the lines. So usually I'll also go over the inner corner of the eye and just kind of dodge that in even more. And then just over the lid, wherever the highlight's kind of hitting. And just kind of dodge that out. I'll then up the flow a little bit, maybe to about 4%. And just run over with the eye as well, just to lighten that up a bit, so you can see that that's kind of made a difference there. And also, while I'm around the eye area, I'll go back to the background copy and just remove any stray eyebrow hairs or anything else that kind of needs to be tidied up. Okay, and now I'm going to go to the burning layer and grab the paintbrush again, make the brush a bit smaller, back to around 10 pixels, but keep the flow at 4%. And I'm just going to go over the eyebrows now and really just kind of fill in the gaps of where they're looking a little bit sparse. So I'm not going to go over them too much because I want it to look quite natural. In a lot of other images I'd probably start cloning, and if they were really unruly I'd probably clone a lot of that. But dodging and burning for this sake does work. I'm going to move back to the dodging now and just brighten up a little bit more under the brow bone. And just above the brow bone as well. And I'm going to zoom out now just to show you guys what that will look like. So as you can see, they're just a little bit more filled in as opposed to the other eyebrow. Still looking fairly natural though, which is what we want. And I'm also just going to, with the burning tool, with the burning layer, run just over the eyelashes as well and darken them up. And just over the bottom ones as well. I'll show you guys what that's done with the burning. So it's just enhanced the eye makeup, and that's all we really want, especially in a natural shot. So we just want it to be light. And now I'm going to go and do the other eye now. Okay, so that is both eyes done now. So they're just kind of looking a little bit more enhanced as opposed to before. So if I just do a before and after, you guys can see that everything's just a little bit more tidied up there. Now I'm going to focus on the edges of the face now, and that's probably most of what I'm going to do for this tutorial. So I'll quickly do that. Okay, so we've started to clean up around the edges a little bit more. So now what I'm going to do is go over any areas that are overly dodged and that need to be brought down a little bit by the burn tool. And now what I would usually do, kind of as a finishing touch, is go back to the dodging layer and then get a really big brush, still have it on 1% flow, and not that big. And then I would usually just go over the highlighted areas, just kind of bring it all together. I feel like it helps kind of blend everything. And then after doing that, I would probably make the brush a little bit smaller again. Bring the flow up a little bit more to about 5%. And then I'd just go over the inner corners and anywhere else that is quite highlighted on the face. Okay, and I'll do another before and after. So the before and then the after. So as you can see, we've really just cleaned up a lot of areas on the skin tone and just evened it out overall a lot more. So as I said before, it's really up to you on how you edit your photos and how much retouching you do. Usually I would probably go a bit further than this, and the way that I've actually edited this photo is a bit different. So I will put a before and after at the end of my original photo and the finished edited product, including coloring as well. So you guys can see a proper before and after there. But this is really just to show you the technique of dodging and burning and show you what it is and how to use it. There's lots of different ways that you could probably use it, but this is just kind of a few of the ways that I like to, and the way that I like to do skin editing. And yeah, as you can see, we've kind of kept a lot of the texture in the image, which is really the original plan of doing it all. So that's the main part of it, I feel, and the most important part. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video, this tutorial, and I hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more beauty retouching tutorials and things like that, please let me know in the comment section below. Also, let me know of any tutorials that you'd like to request, and I'll see what I can do in terms of getting them done. And anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you next time. Bye!